Good evening and welcome to our very last Innovators Mindset Google Hangout on Air. I'm Donna Fry and I am the co-lead with Mark Carbone of Awesome MOOC, which is the forum that we're using to support leaders across Ontario in helping others learn to have professional learning opportunities that are open and available to anyone to participate. So this evening is a very special evening because it's Google for the Innovators Mindset Book Club. So I want to take a moment and say a very special thank you to our 6 leaders who have been working on this project for 4 months, because quite often we get involved in some really interesting sessions and we won't have a chance to say a really good thing. So I want to say thank you to Steve from Superior Greenstone, who's Superior MOOC was one of the idea starters for Awesome MOOC in the first place, and whose dedication to being an innovator is a real inspiration to all of us. And to Jennifer Casa-Todd, whose network around the world has brought in a pretty strong international voice to this book study, and whose idea for a Voxer group has just really revolutionized our idea of how we can study books 24/7 with our colleagues around the world. To our resident artist, Tina Zita, and Deeper Tina Zita, who's been doing all of the artwork for the Innovators Mindset Book Club. Most of the artwork, I shouldn't give her credit for all of it, but essentially all of the artwork for the Innovative Mindset Book Club, and whose experience in breathing innovative practice in her own board in Peel have given us the blog hop. We've all watched from blog hops, and I know that we're going to continue going forward. Noble from Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board, who had the #1 design thinkers in the 21st century, who just brings us back down and grounds us all the time. Miller from Simcoe County District School Board. George keeps asking that if he read the book, but I think George needs to worry, because some of those blogs that Pat has put together for the blog hop have been so deep that I think George has to worry that Pat not only has a book, but is going to write the next ahead of him. And to Lee Castle, who has been such inspiration, keeping us all on track, organizing all of our meetings to the minute, and the Digital Human Library has been such an inspiration for our learning going forward with this project. So it's been Mark and I to work with all of you the last 4 months, so much for enriching our lives and the lives of all of the innovative thinkers across Ontario for you. And so now I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening, my friend and colleague, Stacey Walwyn.
Hi everyone, thanks Donna for introducing the team, and I did want to take a minute too to thank everyone for this opportunity. It was a conversation in passing with Donna and Jen, and it's been an awesome journey, and I've been really welcoming that opportunity to get to know some of you on a deeper level. I knew you all through Twitter, but I feel like we're all fast friends, and we'll be connected forever. So I'm sorry, Donna, it was cutting out really bad for me. I'm not sure if did you introduce our guest panelist? Okay, so yeah, so it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest panelist for tonight, Anita Simpson. Anita is the Superintendent of Programming and Innovation for Simcoe County District School Board. Anita, did you want to take a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. I'm just really delighted to be here tonight, and I feel really is my word for the night. I feel truly blessed to have the role I have and to work with the people I do, and to be working in education at this time, because I feel inspired every day by the people I work with, the people I get to be with, like you tonight, and I'm just really super excited to be here.
Well, awesome. We're glad you could join us, and it's having the opportunities like we have tonight to work with like-minded people that can really make a difference for all of us. So let's get started on our first question tonight. I'm sure it's been posted already on Twitter, but we're looking at this question for the first one tonight. How are you collecting powerful evidence of learning at all levels to showcase learning to each other and your community? So how are we making our learning visible? Would anyone like to get started with that question?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I'm Lee Castle from Avon Maitland, and I'm very, very proud to say that my board, almost board-wide, has adopted blogging as a platform for learning. So teachers are documenting their learning journeys using a class blog, and students are then also in turn documenting their learning journeys on their blogs. The initiative in my board begins in kindergarten, and the long-term vision for the work is that students in kindergarten start blogging, and those blogs follow them all the way through school until they graduate in grade 12. We use the EduBlogs platform, which we've really grown to love. And when students graduate in grade 12, because EduBlogs is a WordPress platform, we can export their blogs for them, so they can actually take those portfolios with them. And that for me is the big piece that I get most excited about. So often students give all this time and do all this work and save everything on school computers, and what do we do at the end of every year? We delete it all, right? And we ask them to start again. So the fact that students can take this entire record of their academic career and be able to use that when applying for post-secondary or during a job interview, and they actually have artifacts and examples of learning to speak to in an interview, I think is a really powerful piece.
Oh, it's extremely powerful. What an opportunity for those students to measure their growth from kindergarten to 12, and the chance for all of you to model and demonstrate digital citizenship. They'll have a positive digital footprint when they leave secondary school. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of excitement around this work, because teachers are now looking at student blogs in September to learn about the kids that are coming to them, which is wonderful, because in the past we've had the OSR and the information in there, and I mean, we look at the report card and there's limited information there for us, and to be able to look at a year's worth of work and growth, feedback from the teacher, interaction from parents and family, connected learning with experts and other students in different parts of the world, it really opens up a lot of opportunities. And to have that documented record is, as I said, it's a really powerful way to continue motivating kids to learn and empowering them to learn as well.
I really like that idea, Lee, of teachers when they're looking at the classes that are coming in the fall. I love the fact that they're getting a chance to experience the student's own voice, because sometimes when we do pass on a paper portfolio, sometimes it's just a particular task, or it's how did they do on a math quiz, or whatever else it is. And I love the concept of it being so representative. And again, that it is in their own voice. That's amazing.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but Jen or Patrick, is there anything you'd like to bring in from Twitter?
Sure. Penny also spoke to blogging as portfolio and how important it is to use blogs as digital portfolios, so reiterating what Lee talked about. And Stephanie, Sarah Brillinger, has a great visual on how she is in fact using documenting student learning as well. And that is, hold on, I just lost it. I don't know if you want to jump in, Patrick, in the meantime.
Sure. We've got M. Hollingsworth talking about something that we sometimes forget, which is allowing the learner to decide or have input into what's the best way for me to document this bit of learning. So rather than having one rigid way that we're going to document all of our learning, but for this piece of learning, what's the best way for me to express what I've learned?
And I think somebody either in one of the blog hops or something that I read somewhere along this process had talked about liking the idea of opening up the blog as that platform because it could store a video, or it could store a piece of stop motion that somebody made, or it could take a photograph and somebody's narration of the photograph, that it didn't just have to be text-based, that there was so much opportunity to put different forms of visual learning in there. And I just wanted to go back to something that Lee said about that idea of starting in kindergarten, because I think if we really want this innovative shift to happen, that it so totally has to be a continuum, and it does need to start at the beginning and carry on with our kids. We're just sort of in the process of starting to think about within my school what our vision is for where we'd like our kids to be on that continuum, and so just really starting to think about that. And I love that idea of starting them with documenting their learning right away.
And Sarah talked about co-teaching, co-assessing, sharing Google documentation across all schools, which is something that is important. And she has a picture of mental math, recording counting strategies for mental math, so in all subject areas as well.
I think one piece to add in is that we document our own learning just as much as we document the learning for students. So I know it's not the best solution, but for us in Peel, we do a recap once a week of all of the tweets and some of the powerful moments that have happened. I just like being able to look back and see the stories I missed, but I think also the fact that you can look back over time and see that growth. It's very easy for us in education to get caught up on what we're not doing, and sometimes it's cool to look back and see what we were doing 3 years ago and how those conversations have shifted.
I like that perspective.
I was going to say, I think you get to tell a story that way over time that is different than the story we've told about students and student learning. So when you can grab pieces of moving photograph, if you will, like a bit of Harry Potter, that you never could capture student learning over that length of time and show the learner what they were like when they were 5 in kindergarten and couldn't pour that thing in that hole or whatever it is. I mean, it's just magic to be able to tell that story of a child over that period of time, and I don't think we've ever had that ability before. That to me is really exciting, because it's our story as educators to want to shape that, but it's also then becomes the student's story to be able to tell too, and we can help them learn what to capture, how to capture it, and I think they'll find their way for sure as soon as they have that opportunity to capture pieces of their learning over that many years. I can't even imagine what that would look like except old, photographs now that we have, or albums, but don't have a digital student legacy yet.
I was thinking Kevin Honeycutt a couple years ago at the closing keynote at Echo/Bit talked about this concept of living out loud, and he talked about us being this first generation who's really going to be able to leave kind of this living legacy, to be able to talk to the generation that comes after us, to leave really different artifacts. And Anita, just what you said just made me think that for kids to be able to see themselves and to see that growth, and it's such a shift for us to kind of say, yeah, okay, I'm going to make this video of me making this that I can then share, and our students do so much of that outside of the classroom. My intermediates do YouTube stuff all the time that I have no idea about, where they are sharing what they know about the things they're passionate about. And I kind of I think that one of the biggest things, at least for me, that I want to really work on is helping my students realize that that's okay to do in class too, because right now they're not there yet, and I want to help open those doors.
And I think one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about using blogging as a platform for learning, or a space like Twitter, is because students are put in a position, and I think more blogging, my heart is more closely connected to blogging, because when we ask students to share their learning, we're giving them time to reflect and to think about what they've done, why they've done it, maybe what was challenging about the work, and I know in my past years, giving them time to to talk about their learning or write about their learning or think about their learning was something that I think got passed over. It was curriculum, and now more of the focus is on taking that time to think and be, it's that metacognitive piece, right? And giving them time to reflect on their learning. And the fact that kids can use so many different tools to demonstrate that learning is hugely important. And one of the other big bonuses I've seen when we ask kids to document what they're doing and then share that documentation is kids are capturing the process. And one example that I shared with a group of teachers in my board was a student in grade 6 who put together this video. And when the video was done, he actually added a bloopers reel at the end. And in that bloopers reel, you actually started to understand how complex of a process it was for him to go through and create all of those different shots at all those different angles, and that there were actually other people involved. And had he not included that bloopers reel, there's so much information that we're missing about what kids are able to do with technology, because they're using tools that we might not be familiar with. And if we don't have an understanding of that and they haven't documented the process, how are we how are we assessing their work? I don't think we really have a true understanding of all of the skills that kids need to be able to complete tasks when using technology.
So I've just been in awe of the last 3 responses, and they just lead into such a smooth transition to our next question, because we want to honor student voice in our classrooms and in our schools. So this lends itself really nicely to question number 2. What are some of the questions that you would ask students to learn more about their learning and experiences in schools? So if we're truly being innovative, we are honoring student voice. So what would we ask of them?
I'm going to pop in on this one quickly because something Lee said made me think. Over the last few years, I've really started to look at reflection and metacognition in my core French classroom. And it's something we do in English after we've been working in French to allow my students to express themselves at their kind of highest ability. And that question about what was challenging about this task is a huge one. It's the one that they really are willing to dive into. And I talk to them about how I want to use that information and how I want to take what they've told me to inform what comes next. And I love the fact that they're totally honest about it, and they're willing to share, and they're willing to say, they're willing to start with, it was hard, and then we can dig into that. And that's become one of my favorite questions.
Do we have any Twitter people that would like to have their voice tonight? Anything out there yet? I know we just popped the question up in Twitter. Might be too soon.
Hi, yeah, there's nothing there yet, but I'm sure it's coming. I just wanted to mention too that one of the questions that we ask students sometimes is, what opportunities are there for your voice to be heard when it comes to your own learning? And then, that way students start to talk about the different opportunities that they have for student voice that's outside of things like school culture or spirit days and dances. Like, do they have student voice around their learning? But my favorite question is, after we ask that question, following it up with whose voice is missing here. So if you're talking to a group of students, a panel or something, principals want to put their best foot forward, and they want to put their best kids out there when you're talking to their kids. So if you ask kids whose voice is missing in this group, they'll tell you their colleagues or their peers around the school who don't have a voice. And so it's great to then seek some of those kids out.
Sorry, go for it, Jen.
Okay, I was just going to say that Amit asked that one of his powerful questions is asking students what they want to learn about and why, so that their curiosity actually drives our teaching. And there was an interesting conversation, I guess, with Jen Abkar about the notion of privacy concerns and blogging, and so that leads me to think about the question that we could ask our students and each other: at what point can we start to make some of this learning public, and can we ask our students, is this something that we should share just with our class, or is this something we should or could share with the world?
Which goes back to that idea of when Lee was talking about developing the blogs from K to 12. It's also, you know, giving them lots of opportunity to learn all about digital citizenship. So that's a really good question. Who are you going to be sharing this with?
Yeah, and I think what drives blogging is that it is grounded in the curriculum, and it comes down to purpose and audience, right? What's the purpose? Who is the audience? And then, of course, you're bringing in so many other skills and thought processes when you're drafting and writing and then deciding to publish something for an audience. And I think one of the what's been a real driver and motivator for students is the idea of potential audience. And I am often asked by teachers about that idea of privacy and security and how do we protect. And one of the reasons we chose the EduBlogs platform is because you have 5 different privacy settings that you can choose from. So you can enter in at your comfort level. But one of the questions I often ask when teachers make the decision to password protect their blogs or keep them private, so it's just the teacher and the class, is that, you know, the purpose is to extend what's happening in your space and make that those ideas and that learning available to a larger audience. So by password protecting your blog and locking it down, all you're doing is taking what's happening in your space, in your classroom, and moving it into a digital space, but you're not actually changing the audience. And part of what motivates kids and engages kids to write is that there is an audience above and beyond the classroom teacher. And as fabulous and awesome as we are, it's a little stale for them after a while, right? Knowing that the same person is reading their work again and again. It's the same reason that drives us as educators and as people to use social media. We crave audience, and our students do as well. And it reminded me of something Lisa said. You know, kids are going home and doing all of this work on YouTube and using platforms like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. So it reminds me of Scott McLeod's message about taking the extracurricular, what the kids are doing at home, and finding a way to make it the curricular.
I just had that conversation with e-teachers today, and again, I think it's more about the comfort level of the educators versus the students. Because I mentioned these kids have they've been meeting in online spaces. They have been using social media accounts. They have been building cities in Minecraft. This is the world they exist in. It may not be our world, but they're more than willing to teach us. So I think that that's a really great idea that we need to you know, provide that space for them and let them guide us. Let them be the the sage on the stage, for lack of a better phrase, because you're never going to know it all. You can't wait. And I think our parents want to connect. I think our school communities want to connect. They may not be able to connect in the time frames and in the traditional formats that we're used to presenting, and these blogs and all these other virtual connections we have provide a really good opportunity for us to engage our school and parent community in the learning. Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm going to let Tina jump in. She was ahead of me.
Tina, sorry. Yep.
That's okay. I think part of the thing, though, when we look at the question and we look solely at the questions, is we don't necessarily see the place that we play when we ask those questions. So I guess I was challenged a little bit. I was at the Peel Technological Skills Challenge. It's kids doing really cool stuff. And I went by a high school. It's all high school students, and I went into the room where they were doing web design. And it was funny when I started the conversation, how eager they almost, like, I felt like if I stayed, the competition was going to be skewed because they just wanted to keep talking. And it was just that informal of, oh, this is what I use to design websites. I don't do HTML and the back and forth and what was possible. I went to some kids that were doing, I don't know what it's called when you build a wall, mortar, whatever that's called. And I was shocked when I just said, could I take a picture? And they said, you want to try? And I think we can have all of the questions, and I was thinking of your question, Donna, that you posted to Twitter about what's next and what they want to do next. But I don't think if you're not in that learning stance with them at that moment, the questions just become questions that we ask, and they don't become questions that empower us to really move forward as learners, whether I'm working with adults or whether I'm working with 10-year-olds. Like, I think you have to, sometimes with education, especially with innovation, we say the kids know it, but you still need to jump in. Even if it's trying Minecraft and failing miserably at it, there still needs to be some engagement. And the Italian hands are coming.
My students my students get the biggest kick out of the fact that I am somewhat of an epic fail at Minecraft because I am not a spatial person. I'm not really good at building with Lego for the same reason. And sometimes I shy away from it because I don't like stuff I'm not good at. But for my students, it's just, and for my own kids, my younger son is a Minecraft maestro. He is astounding. And he and I work together for him to learn to be patient with me. And it's really great. And when I do it with my coders and when I do it in class, it's such a valuable experience for them to have you be the learner. It's amazing. And I need to make a little bit of a lateral shift, because one thing I'm finding really interesting with my intermediate students is they're kind of having their social media world and their classroom world kind of clashing a little bit if I suggest, for example, trying to use a Vine. They all laugh and say, well, Vines are inappropriate because everything they watch, Vines are inappropriate. And so we have to talk about, so what are you, if you want to use this, it doesn't have to be inappropriate. It's a really cool tool. Let's look at what it is, because they've got this image in their head of what it is. And sometimes I think partly that can be part of our role, is kind of saying, okay, yeah, let's look at this and see how else you might use it.
Awesome. I'm sure that your son appreciates learning beside you. Does Anita, go ahead.
One of the things I would like to ask students is, what questions do you want us to ask you? Because I don't think we open up that space for them very often to let them be the one to tell us what they might like to tell us. We always have a question, and I know it's great. We have to have good questions. Sometimes questions can be so open that we don't know what we're going to get, and when they're that open, you just might hear some interesting things from kids. I can't imagine always how they'll answer that question.
I think some of them might struggle because they're not used to being asked that question.
I'm not used to being asked that question, to be honest. So, I mean, I suppose I'd have to think about it too, in the context, right?
Jen or Patrick, are there some Twitter comments you'd like to share?
Jen Abkar asks, sorry if I said that wrong, Jen, what do you like to play, why, and what are you passionate about and why? And what I love about that is, if a student doesn't know what they're passionate about, then that's such an opportunity for the teacher to be able to help that student to figure that out. How could you use the skill in life, asks Stephanie, when creating learning goals with kids?
And I also like Amit's tweet about when he learns or co-learns with students, they have to learn patience, to be patient with him, because he's learning at the same time they are. And so at that time, he's teaching them patience as well.
Mm-hmm. And Asing asks questions which lean toward a growth mindset, especially challenging why they know what they know, which goes back to that metacognition piece too.
So we're hearing the theme of patience when we're learning with our students. So Lisa, you're not alone in having your son learn patience in teaching you Minecraft. Okay, so we're going to look at the third question here, and this one I'm really excited to hear everyone's answers to. Our third question for the evening is, what's your story now, and what's the story you want to tell, and how will you make this happen? Oh, a George Couros sighting!
Stop. Is there
Well,
only 4
everyone.
people here, or am I missing something?
No, I think you're missing people. There's quite a few of us.
Oh,
So for those,
okay.
so just give me a second, George. We are very fortunate, everyone, to have the author of The Innovator's Mindset, George Couros, is popping in. Hey, George.
Hey, everyone.
Where are you tonight? What hotel? What city?
I'm actually in Winnipeg right now. I'm here for the week, just working with their educators here. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for squeezing us in. I know you've got a tight schedule.
Yeah.
So you just jumped in at the perfect time. The question we just asked everyone was, what's your story now? And what's the story you want to tell? And how you make this happen?
Don't ask me. I'm just listening. I want to jump in on any conversation, so don't expect answers from me right away.
Can I go back to
Anyone?
the first question and say it's about telling your story, because we started talking about blogs, and maybe the answer is just to tell it. Start telling your story, and that's as simple as that. In a funny kind of way, because that's where we began that conversation.
Mark, does that story sound familiar to you? Donna, does that story sound familiar to you? In encouraging me to join Twitter? Because Mark Carbone asked me what my Twitter handle was. Well, I don't even know, 3 years ago, and I said, oh, I don't have it. I'm not on Twitter. And he said, well, why not? I said, I really don't think I have anything to say. He goes, oh, you do, and when it's your time, you'll find the words. And sure enough, I found the words and the shit pictures, and I'm sure people are sometimes wishing that I didn't have as many words, but yeah, you have to own your own story. And being a connected educator, and I have to thank Donna and Mark for that, has really taught me that we need to own our own stories, and we do that by sharing with others.
Okay, so now I'm weepy. That was a gorgeous story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Mark, what a gift to say to somebody, yeah, you have lots to say, and you'll find the words. And we need to do that for each other. We need to do that for our students. I have the dubious honor right now in the space where I'm working, where it is often said that I am all about the share, and that's not always a compliment in my space. I am the resident extrovert in the building I work in, and I wish if there was one thing that I could gentle people into doing, it would be to realizing that power of starting to share your story. And we do it in the staff room, and we do it with each other, but to take it to that next level and start to share it with that bigger audience. Lee, you talked about real audience, and for people to realize that there are other people out there who want to hear their story and who have things to add and who can help them build the next chapter. I think that's one thing that I really strive to do all the time.
So I don't know if I can pop in. Just one of the interesting things. I actually had this conversation today, and I've had this several times. Stacy, quit taking pictures. So, one of the things that I always say, and often I'm brought in as the expert in the room, right? So I'm brought in to speak and work with a group. And so there can be some intimidation just by title and things like that. And so I always try to get people to think about that. I always work for the point of what is best for kids. And if you work backwards from there and you work with that knowledge, there's something really powerful here. And so I always ask the question, I'm like, here I am, the expert in the room. Do any of you think you could actually make me a better teacher? And a lot of people are like a little reluctant to answer that. I'm like, every single one of you could help me become a better teacher. Everyone. What is really crucial is, where do I find your stuff? Where do I find these things that you do that would make me a better teacher? I can't come into your classrooms, and neither can other teachers, because I can't just leave kids for 2 hours to go watch another teacher teach. And so I need to be able to access this, because if I can see your stuff, if I can see the things that you're sharing and that you're doing, and I could take them and maybe not use them exactly how they are, but just having access to this, it actually really helps me push my own thinking. And that's one of the things I've really learned to leverage, in my own learning. And one of the things I'm really, to be honest, really proud of in the book is how many other people I shared, is how many other people's stories I was able to share and learn from. And it's because of years and years of really trying to look deep into what other people are doing and learn from those experiences, as opposed to it's just my viewpoint. It's trying to share these stories of others, because they all make you better teachers. And I think if you taught 50 years or 5 months, you can make me a better teacher, but I need to be able to see what you do.
I'm listening to what George is saying, and I'm reading some of the comments coming through on Twitter now, and I love what Nancy Zomer tweeted. Just start telling your story. Maybe that's how you start blogging. And Catherine Lethbridge followed that up with, you have to be brave to start to share your story, but once you do, it gets easier. And I think that's an important point, because I, like George, firmly believe in the power of sharing. And that idea of the ripple effect, right? One simple act of sharing can really create ripples, and you have no idea just how far those ripples will spread. And it does require, I think, for a lot of people, courage to believe in themselves and feel that they do have something worthy of sharing. And as George said, and as I firmly believe, we all do have something to offer. And it's I think self-confidence is a important contributing factor too to why people choose to share or not share.
I think probably another piece is that we don't stop at the sharing part. I think sometimes some of us that put ourselves out there, I guess I'm talking about myself, putting yourself out there is one thing, and I may have had that same prompt by somebody on the panel that I needed to start sharing as well. So we've all had those moments, but I think it's that evolution as we go along as well. As much as our job as innovative leaders, no matter whether we're in a school or in a building, in a school or in a system, I think it's our job to make sure we're evolving just as much as we're inviting others to evolve. So I found for me the last year is really, it's been about not just sharing my learning, but also sharing my learning in progress and putting myself out there sometimes when ideas aren't necessarily complete. But I think I need to work better at making the connection between other people's stories. That was my next step, coming back to the question.
And it's about being ready yet sometimes, and that holds back people. I think that jumping in, that just telling, and here's me saying that when I don't blog, but I'm here tonight, so that's the first step. But I think that a lot of people are held back by that worry that what they put out there won't be perfect, which fits really well with Innovators Mindset, that nothing can be perfect start, really. And if you're waiting for perfect, probably the enemy of all that putting that out there is, really.
I think that's a really good point, and it's funny because you see so many teachers doing everything they can to reach that unattainable notion of perfection, and then they finally think they've reached it, and then they put their work out and someone criticizes it anyway. So it's kind of like, the idea of like you're going to find this point and you're going to get to this point and someone's going to challenge you is probably realistic. And I think that being comfortable and being vulnerable and saying, what, this is kind of, where I'm at this point, and it's just my development. It's interesting, and I talked about this, kind of in the book, is that I really looked at my book as I looked at my blogging as a formative assessment, and my book is a summative, because if you challenge me on my book, I can't just go back and change stuff. I can't go, it's like it's final. It's almost like a tablet. That's how it feels when I post it out. But I started to change that thinking a little bit, because there is no finality to learning. And the beautiful thing is like things like this group that, I've been able to be a part of the Voxer group and see that, read blog posts, is that even as the author, I'm continuously learning and developing through this process, and I'm still batting around these ideas. which was kind of the purpose of the book. It wasn't meant to be the formula to become innovative, because that will never happen. There's no formula, because 5 years from now, a lot of the books that I'm seeing out there are going to be irrelevant because something new is going to come up. And I wanted to write something that 20 years from now would still be beneficial and spark conversations and have these things, because it's hopefully meant to start conversations, not end them. And I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about, what's going on in this group and what you guys have all been doing, is that it's not like, here's the book, here's the answer, go do it. It's like, pushing conversations, challenging, even the thoughts that I have in this book to really grow. And I think that's one of the things that we have to be more comfortable with in doing this. If I could just add a couple of things about the sharing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a blog anymore, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Twitter. I've been really doing a lot of these little video reflections with people to give them a first opportunity to share a story, and literally I just go up to them and say, can I take a video of you? I'm going to share it on Twitter. I get them to talk about something and they're freaked out, and then they post it and nothing bad happens. And I think it's like a little kind of, sigh of relief. But one of the other things that I'm working with a group now for a couple months over time, and I said, I'm going to see you in March, and I'm going to see you in April, and I'm going to see you in May. But if you only use those 3 times to learn, we're missing out on some really great opportunities. So we actually set up like a collaborative blog so that all of them are sharing in one space. So they might not have to go through the onus of having their own blog and, creating it. It's just that they're going to be sharing, but because there's about 200 people that I'm working with over these months, and I've asked them only to blog twice, there's going to be 400 blog posts approximately in a 2-month period in one space. And you talk about the data that we're actually creating there, of them pushing each other, and because they're subscribing by email, bless you, Stacy. And so when they're subscribing by email and actually doing those different things, they actually, we're not only going to create stories, but they're going to push each other, because I'm going to get an email update that someone else blogged, and I'm going to be able to read their story, and it's going to like, man, I need to start thinking this way, or I need to start doing this. But in a short time, just having something really simple where all these people can contribute to one space is actually creating, not only pushing stories, but it's collecting some really powerful data of what is happening in the classrooms. But it's also getting some people to dip their toe in for the first time without the onus of they have to maintain their own blog, and if they don't blog enough, then now I feel guilty, and then it just gets worse and worse, and then I'm not doing this, right? So we give them a space where we're pushing them, but it's also collecting a bunch of stuff and giving them kind of that first taste of what it could look like.
So I'm going to jump in with something that Jen Hanga did, and it's connected with what you just said, George, and that's the idea of, she created a report for her district, but included video reflections of both teachers and students, so that excitement and that learning process can be seen and felt. And I know even in our own board, we're trying the collaborative blog to see how it goes, because not everyone does feel comfortable with their own blog. And Stephanie English started with the quote, which is, what if everyone tweeted one thing? So or a few things they're doing in their classroom, because I think we do have to be mindful of the different entry points of people. And the idea is that we want the sharing to happen. We just want people to come in where they can.
Do you mind if I pop in here for on that? Because as someone, and I know Mark and I have had many conversations about this, that we've been in this business for, well, I started teaching 20 years ago, so we've been doing this for a really long time. And we felt like outliers, and we've been called rogues. I know many of you have been called rogues as well. There's been all kinds of names about people who do things differently. By blogging and by continuing to make your practice open, you're building knowledge, you're catalyzing that knowledge building, but you're normalizing it. So when I say to superintendents that maybe when you choose your next principal, it should be someone who is blogging, sharing openly, and being a lead learner that actually shows what they're learning, they won't say to me, oh yeah, but we'd never find anybody who could do that. So by normalizing it, then I think we get people who have the capacity to really understand what's possible, to actually move up and become leaders of education in the province. And so even if you feel like your blog is a little bit scary, by normalizing the practice as this is what educators do, they make their learning visible, you help the entire collective move forward instead of it looking like an outlier. So those two are being brave and actually doing it.
And don't you find, Donna, that perhaps in our physical spaces, the work that we put out there, or the comments, or being an outlier, it can be put us in difficult positions, and maybe we feel like we're being people feel like they're being criticized. But when you share yourself with like-minded people, it's extremely supportive, and everyone is extremely encouraging in those online environments. So blogging is a really safe place to share your ideas for many that maybe don't have that comfort level in their physical space.
Yeah, I would agree. And at Teach, Miss K, Nicole Kaufman, who's a teacher in my board, I love what she just shared here. My story is about growth and collaboration. I know that I don't have to do everything alone. And I think that speaks to what you were just saying, Stacy, absolutely, that when we start something new, if we look hard enough, we find others, right, who are doing similar things, and we connect just like we did as a group here, and that we don't have to do it alone. And we may, we may start there, but it doesn't take too long before we start to find that community and that sense of belonging, and that empowers us to do more with what we have, and take those ideas further and build on them and celebrate them then with others.
I want my name up there like Lee. Special.
I can show you how to do
it,
I have to charge you.
Lee, I like the language you used about celebrating, because that's what you're doing, right? And I don't think we do a very good job of I don't think it's in any of our natures to toot our own horns, and so, but to share the joy in the learning that we're undertaking, or the joy in the learning that we see in our students, and I think that's a really, really powerful statement, just the celebration of it all.
Especially when there are often tears sometimes throughout the process, it's nice to have that celebration at the end. There can be.
I don't know what you're talking about. So we have only 10. Go ahead, George.
I just been thinking about something today, and I don't blog every day, but I reflect daily, and just kind of thinking about this, it's been kind of batting around in my head, is that the work that we do as educators, that kind of Donna's talking about this notion of outliers, and really pushing people, is that part of the job is really tough, is that if you do something, if you're trying to push people and nobody gets mad at you, you're probably not pushing as hard as you can. That at some point, someone will probably be frustrated with you. And I'm not saying that you're going to the point where you're trying to get people upset with you, but there's like a really great quote. I think it's T.S. Eliot, and it says like, only when we go too far can we find out how far we can go. Like and it's something that you think about, is that, and I'm not saying, hey, you should go out of your way, and when you've made someone mad, you're doing a good job. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's the notion that it's to be comfortable, that if you at the end of the day are trying to do what you can to serve kids, that sometimes when we get point of being frustrated, and this is me articulating this literally for the first time because I've just been thinking about this today, is that you're going to get to a point where people are going to be frustrated with you and feel uncomfortable, but when that discomfort starts to happen, that's when people are thinking about it. That when people are going home and like brewing on it and like maybe a little bit bothered, a lot of learning starts to happen to that point. And I think that when we're trying to push this, we have to be comfortable when people are seemingly frustrated in some cases, because that's where we can't worry that, you know, everyone's comfortable and everyone's ready at this point, because if we're waiting for that, we'll be waiting forever. And I think that we have to get to this point where we are comfortable being uncomfortable ourselves and really pushing, because that learning happens, and it's not because you don't like somebody, it's not because you're doing this, it's because we're all trying to push to create something better than what we found when we first started teaching. And I think that's a very admirable thing.
Do you think, though, that there's a responsibility with the push to also establish a community that can support the conversation?
Yeah, like you don't want to like push somebody to frustration and say, "See ya, you're on your own." Like, that's definitely not what you want to do. But it's that you know, like there's that tension, right? And like I'm pretty big into sports. And you see like great teams get really frustrated with each other because they're flirting with that point of you know, of like pushing each other too hard, but they always have your back. Like at the end of the day, like, hey, I'm pushing you, but tomorrow, like, I still adore you, and I'm still going to be there for you, and I'm still going to support you. And I think that's why that notion of relationships is so crucial, is that people know that you're trying to push them to get better, not push them out the door, right? Like, you're trying to really embrace this. And so
I find for me the hardest part is picking, and maybe I don't need to worry about it as much, but choosing who you push and who is not. Some people aren't ready for that place of uncomfort. Not that we need to always keep that in mind, but right. Sometimes we can create that tension in different ways. Like, I was talking to somebody today about the AGO, and they have a great exhibit for medieval art. And I remember walking through, and then there was just one piece of art that didn't seem like it belonged. And just having that moment where your brain just tries to put the pieces together of trying to figure out the connection. And I think we could be creating that tension with something as simple as challenging what those concepts are. Just like you said about sharing, that we're so focused on Twitter that people are sharing in Pinterest and Instagram, and sometimes maybe we're not challenging them to better use those tools, and maybe always pushing folks to the tools that I feel most comfortable with.
Well, you know, like I'm just checking out Twitter, and I'm seeing Paul and Donna made the comment, but are people ready for those of us who push? I think that one of the skills that's really crucial is kind of trying to figure out if I'm talking to somebody that's open, like is on the cusp, is maybe not ready for what I'm saying, but is open to learning, and those that no matter what I say, they're not doing anything. And I know this is going to sound horrible. I go focus on the people that are not necessarily ready for the push, but are open. They're open to learning, because you just kind of, you know, when you get in those conversations with somebody and you're like, you just know no matter what you're going to say, they're digging in. And so I think that we have to sometimes say, you know what, that's okay. So I'm going to work on the rest of the culture. I'm going to work on this, and we're going to work with all these other people. And I think that, you know, some people will, like, I've had people say, I'm not open to new learning. And these are educators. I'm like, this is the business of what we do, is learning. So if you're not open to it, we're going to be out of business soon. And so I think that we have to kind of decide sometimes and know when, you know what, hey, okay, I appreciate that, and then kind of move on. But if you kind of, like, there's that point where you start feeling these people, and they're like, they want something, they're trying something, but, you know, they need a little extra, and they need to be a little bit, you know, maybe a little bit aggravated, a little bit, but they're open to it in the first place. And so I do think that we need to kind of hold each other accountable. And one of the things I talked about this morning was the notion of 200% accountability. Is a really great thing in a book. I cannot remember the name of the book, but it's like, do we wait for the principal to push our colleague teacher in the classroom, or do we push each other? Like, what if you're dependent upon the principal moving people along, it's going to take forever. Do we actually hold each other accountable, because we see every kid in that school as our kid, that we're school teachers, not just classroom teachers, that there's something bigger than just what happens in our room?
Hey George, it reminds me of this notion of moving from cooperative learning, so teachers are cooperating with each other, to the idea of collaborating, but moving even past that into co-responsibility. And so I think what you're talking about is it's everybody in the building, and it's not just the principal. And that idea of co-responsibility for learning, I think, is powerful.
For me, it speaks to the what you don't address, you condone. So what you're not doing something about, you're letting it happen, and so you're part of that culture that's saying, I'm not going to make that difference. I'm not going to ask that hard question. I'm going to look the other way. So you have to decide where your moral compass is on that all the time. I think if you're disrupting and innovating, you're always going to shake somebody up somewhere, and it's not going to be comfortable. And I think if you suffer from wanting to be liked all the time, and in that place, you can't have that all the time. You have it a lot of the time because there are many like-minded people out there, but you can't have it all the time, I think.
I'm just sorry, guys. I'm just being cognizant of the time. It's 8:59, and we've had a fantastic evening. I don't want this to end. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. And George, I think I had this tagged in my book to end the session, because it resonated with me. Your quote at the beginning about innovation being about empathy, and then this quote at the end, the way you ended the book. So I'd like to end tonight's session on this note. This is from George. I'm also reminded of the biggest game changer, and it isn't technology. The biggest game changers in education are, and always will be, the educators who embrace the innovator's mindset. So on that note, we're going to leave you with a question about what is the one new thing you're going to do to move closer to a new vision of learning for you and your students. And I want to thank all the panelists tonight, Ms. Simpson,
Can I say
for
something before you close off?
Oh, certainly.
I just all of you in this hangout, people that are watching, people that have done this, you have no idea how much I appreciate you guys sharing. So I did everything I could to be able to come into this tonight, because I do really appreciate all this stuff. I'm hoping that this experience for you has left you a better educator, because I've grown from the conversations too. So I just really want to thank you all for all of the support you've done for this. It really means a lot to me.
Well, George, we thank you for putting the ideas of your blogs into this book so that you can start that conversation for the rest of us, and for this fantastic group of people that came together that challenged our thinking and forced us to learn new things so that we could share our ideas with everyone. And I know we are all very grateful for that opportunity. So I know the conversation won't end tonight. I know our friendships and our connections won't end tonight. And thank you all. You're the best group of rogue educators I've ever met. I'd go rogue with any one of you any day. So thank you all and all those who are following on Twitter tonight, thank you for your comments over the last 4 sessions. And so I'll sign off if anyone else would like to say something. Otherwise, good night, everyone. And thank you, George, for making that effort tonight.
Yeah, of course.